have to learn all of that type of stuff. And remember, like I mentioned, we all come from different backgrounds, so not everybody knows about space when you get there. I didn't really know everything about space. So it's nice to learn about things called orbital mechanics and how actually spacecraft fly, how rockets are built, how rockets and spacecraft work together. So that's all part of the initial training. So some of it's classroom stuff where you're sitting there and the teacher is teaching you and you're taking notes and you're having quizzes about basic space type of stuff. Other things are, like I was mentioning, you go around and visit all the different centers and you see what they make. Who makes the engines, who makes the payloads that are going to be on board the space station. How are the electronics made? What are some considerations when you're making space equipment? It gets really cold in space. It gets really hot in space. So how do electronics work? So you go all around the centers and you learn about all of that type of stuff. And then you learn about stuff like how to fly a robotic arm or how to fly actually a spacecraft. How are you going to dock the spacecraft to the space station? And then you learn about entry. How would a spacecraft be controlled on the way in? And then also you learn about spacewalking. So we all practice. We all have to wear our spacesuits, get suited up, get fitted for our spacesuits, practice going underwater and working underwater in our spacesuit to simulate how it is in microgravity. And then there's also those sort of interesting things like you go to food tasting, space food tasting class, or a space clothes class. So those things are sort of fun, and you don't have to practice for those. You don't have to study for those.
Okay, so on Expedition 14, which was your first expedition, and you were sitting and waiting to be launched on a huge bomb, it's a controlled bomb practically, which is going to take you to space. And I would like to ask this for everybody's benefit, for probably from all the astronauts. While you are sitting and waiting of this thing to happen, how do you keep your nerves calm? I mean to say, it's a huge thing that is going to blow below you. So how do you keep your nerves calm? There's 6 hours, 7 hours of sitting there, on a tilted seat. So how the things go? What do you talk about, and what goes on in the cockpit at that point of time?
We can't tell you.
Oh.
I'm joking. So the first time is always interesting, and the people who have done it before, they try to tell you about it. They try to tell you this is what's going to happen step by step by step. But I think we're all impatient a little bit, and we don't listen. And we're like, yeah, thank you very much. And then you're there, and you're like, what's going to happen? And to be honest with you, the first time, I think for most everybody who is an astronaut, they don't really believe it's going to happen. And that was absolutely true for me, and I flew with 3 other first-time flyers. And when we went out to the launch pad, we had practiced this once before when the spacecraft was not fueled and not ready to go, just to practice to wear your spacesuit, walk out to the launch pad, go up the elevator, and one after another go into the spacecraft and get in your seat and be seated. And so we've practiced this before. We did it when it was launch day, and it just felt like the same thing. And like you weren't believing that it would actually happen. And actually on that day, our launch got canceled because of weather, and so we all got out and see, it's not going to happen. And then 2 days later, we all got back in the spacecraft, and it was pouring rain when we went there, so for sure we were thinking, no, we're not going to go again. And actually had talked to my family on the phone. I said, I'll see you in a couple hours after we get out of the spacecraft. But that day, we launched, and the countdown kept going and going and going, and then it was like 5 minutes, and then the APUs start, the auxiliary power units, which run the hydraulic controls for the flight control system. And if you think about it, in the rocket, we're sitting where the blue cap is here, and the flight controls and the engines are way at the bottom. And so there's a moment arm here, right? So if something happens down here, you're really going to feel it up at the top. You're really going to feel what's going on. So the flight control surface start to move, and we're like, oh my God, things are happening. And oh my gosh, it's only 5 minutes. We better figure out what's happening here. And then 6 seconds before launch, the main engines on the space shuttle light. They're not really in line. So here is the center of gravity of the spacecraft, and the main engines are on the side. And so that causes the whole spacecraft to do a thing they call twang. Yeah. And so it pushes over, and you can feel all that way up at the top. And we're like, oh man, and it starts getting a little bit loud, and then the solid rocket boosters on either side light, and that propels you off the ground. And beforehand, we were all in disbelief, and then at 5 minutes, it's like a surge of emotions, and then when the solid rockets light, we were all like, woohoo, let's go. So, then you're on for the ride. So you're holding on for dear life in your seat, of course, for 8 minutes or so when you're on your way. There's some major points along the way which are really gratifying. The solid rockets come off at 1.5 minutes or so, and so those create a very bumpy ride. So all of a sudden the ride gets much smoother when those pop off. But then you start to just accelerate really fast, and you start to get this push on your chest. And this is one of those things people had told you about before, but you didn't pay attention to. It's like, oh yeah, I'm going to have a hard time breathing. It's okay, because so much force is pushing back on you. But that only happens for about 30 seconds or so, and so that gets relieved, and then you just start accelerating a whole lot. And then finally the main engine shut off, and then everything starts to float, and we all just were laughing, continually laughing, because it was like, this is so crazy. Things are just floating. It's just like I was sitting here and the bottles just started to float off the table. So it was a pretty amazing experience.
Okay, other than thank God,
yeah.
what are the, if you could remember that, what was the first thought that came to your mind when you saw Earth from space?
Yeah, I was downstairs on the mid deck,
okay.
and the commander called me. Mark Polanski said, "Sonny, come up to the flight deck." And so flew up there, and there's a row of windows on the space shuttle, and then a couple over the top, and we were upside down actually, in relation to the Earth. Not that there is an up or a down, but as you turn this way, below the space shuttle was the universe, and above the space shuttle was Earth. Okay. And I see this round part of the Earth, and I'm like, they were right. All those scientists are right. It is round. So that's cool. But actually, just absolutely beautiful planet. Like, wow, that's where we live, and we are so far away, but actually, in relation to whatever else is in the universe, so close. And it really leaves an impression on you like, wow, there's just this little teeny small atmosphere that's protecting this planet.
Yeah, I remember you have used the word, I am the citizen of the universe now. So
I copied that. That was from Kalpana.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I also wanted to know this. Once you go out and see space and then understand that how tiny you are in the greater scheme of things, what changes in you as a human being generally for astronauts?
Yeah, I think everybody goes through this process of when you see the Earth like that, particularly when you're up there for a long period of time and space becomes your home, more so than actually Earth for that 6 months or so that you're up there. You have crewmates who are not necessarily from your country. I mean, we all have a lot of pride for the countries that we come from. Of course, there's an American flag on my flight suit right here. Of course, I'm half Indian. I brought an Indian flag with me up to space. But that actually seems honestly a little trivial when you're in space. You don't really feel identified with one country for any real reason. You feel more identified that you're part of this planet. We're from this planet. We're human beings from this planet. And I think that is a more overwhelming feeling, and we're actually really lucky to have our little planet to live on.
You can have water if you want. Okay, so you carried Bhagavad Gita on your first trip. You carried Bhagavad Gita. You carried that deity Ganesh Murti, and you also carried a samosa. Mm-hmm. So, what was the thought behind carrying a samosa and Bhagavad Gita?
Well, of course, my dad has left a big impression on me, and I read comic book versions of Bhagavad Gita when I was young and stuff. So I figured I should move on and maybe read something that was actually a little bit more of substance in my life. And I thought, what other better place to do that was, well, you're in space. So luckily he gave me a small version of it, so I didn't have a whole lot to read, because I really wanted to spend time in space doing space things, and you can read when you're on Earth. But it was very influential and inspirational for me to just read a couple lines of the Bhagavad Gita before I would go to bed each night. So Ganesh, of course, Ganesh is, Ganesh is Ganesh, and Ganesh is fun, and Ganesh means a lot of good things to everybody there. So I shared Ganesh with everybody, and they all knew he was there with us. And samosas is another thing that I shared, of course. So unfortunately, I got the samosas just when I was leaving. But that's also a good thing, because when you're leaving, somebody new is coming there. That's what that means. And so, of course, we have to have a little party. Everybody has to have a little party. And so when you have a party to welcome somebody, what do you like to do? You like to give them the things that you feel are most important to you and are represent you. So I was able to share my samosas as well as my Ganesh with
I have an
everybody.
important question to ask now, because I take kids to NASA, and while we are in US, it is very difficult to find samosas.
What?
So where did you get a samosa in US? That's my question.
Oh, we have a big Indian community in Houston, a little bit farther away from where NASA is, but on Highway 3, if you go next time, there's the Indo-Pak grocer right there.
Okay. Thank you.
That's where you get your good samosas.
Yeah, thank you, thanks a lot.
Yeah, I'll hook you up next time you come.
Thank you, thanks a lot. Could you take us through spacewalk, and how did you think of doing so many spacewalks? Was it planned? Was this something which was told to you to be done, or you decided that I'll do it, or you loved it, going out of the spacecraft and facing all those bullets coming to you at 28,000 kilometers per hour speed?
So I wish that you could do a spacewalk anytime you wanted and go for a walk, but that's not quite how it works. Usually when we're going out for a spacewalk, it's very well planned, and people know that you're going to do that because there's a lot of people on the ground that have to help you get ready for this as well. I know it doesn't sound quite true, because you have to be able to put your clothes on yourself, right? You're not having everybody on the ground help you. You have one person there that sort of helps you, because the suit is very big. It weighs over 300 pounds. Not that it matters while you're up in space, the weight, but it's big and it's bulky, and it's hard to actually see all the connections and stuff. So you need somebody to help you a little bit to get it all connected up. So on my first flight, we were in the middle of constructing the space station. It was not all the way constructed, so it wasn't. So we were removing pieces and parts around. So while we were doing that, you use the robotic arm to grab the pieces. It gets disconnected, and you might move a piece over here. But then you need somebody to go out there and connect the pieces together. So that's sort of what we were doing on my first space flight. And we ended up doing 4 spacewalks. They were all planned. They were all decided. It was all determined what day it was going to happen, so people on the ground could support and watch what we were doing. So not only were they just watching with their eyes, but they're also watching with telemetry. So whenever you have a box that's on the space station, it has electrical currents that are running through it to know that maybe pumps are running, heaters are running, fans are running. And electrical box also means the spacesuit. The spacesuit has a computer on it, and we want to know that the air is circulating around, the water is circulating around, and I can see that myself, but also the people on the ground through telemetry can see, and they can back me up. So if there's any problems with my spacesuit, they can help me and advise me what's going on, as well as my partner who's out there. So they all have to be ready to go to watch all this as well. So those were all planned. Now on my second flight, a little bit different story. The space station is already built. It's about 5 years later. And so now the space station's primary goal is science. And so we're up there to do science experiments. But when anything is a little bit old, your car, your house, whatever iPhone that you have, I can't imagine anybody would have an iPhone for 10 years. But anyway, 10 years later, after this thing started, things are starting to break. And so we had to go outside and fix some things. So those were a little less planned. which means it meant the ground needed maybe about 3 or 4 days to get ready. We didn't have the opportunity to go into the big swimming pool and practice the things that we were going to do. We did that all via computer programs. And so we would be up on the space station. They would show us a computer program, a visual, and visualize where we would go outside, what tasks we would do, and we would get all the tools together, and then we would just know in our minds what we were going to do when we go outside. So a little bit different.
Okay, so I was just going through the internet today morning, and the wasabi incident is everywhere. The ingredient that you wanted for yourself, a little bit spice on ISS. What was the incident? I couldn't understand, because probably there was some difference in pressure and the tube simply exploded. And what happened?
Pretty much so. I was getting all excited to have my simulated sushi by having some little packet of tuna or salmon, and then put a little wasabi on it. Now this was, again, like the samosas, was a specialty thing that every now and then your family can put together a care package and send that to NASA, and they'll find a spacecraft that is going to the space station and send it up to you. So we got special stuff. So wasabi was my special thing. I had just got it, opened the package like Christmas, like, wow, there it is. And so I can eat this today. And when you're opening this plastic container, there was a little silver plastic wrap on the, like aluminum plastic wrap on it first. So I'm holding it, I open it like this, my hands are occupied, and I go to open this one. And of course, this aluminum wrapper is not like you can close it, because once you open it, it's essentially open. And as soon as I opened it, the stuff started shooting out at me, and I'm trying to catch it with my body like this, because I didn't want it to go on the wall behind me, because then everyone is stuck with that terrible smell. Unfortunately, fortunately, I got most of it on me. But then I couldn't, just closing the cap. But then I had that smelly sweatshirt, because we don't really have a washing machine, so I had that.
Yeah, I remember you always saying, the last water that are sprinkled on you before you fly is the last bath that you're going to have. You always use that. Okay, so there was an incident where you donated your hair for locks of love. So can we know about it? How did you come up, thought of an idea, and what happened?
Actually, a friend of mine's daughter, she was, I think, 10 at the time. We were doing a little local triathlon, and I had known her for a long time, and all of a sudden Grace showed up with really short hair, and I said, Grace, what happened to your hair? She goes, oh, I donated my hair to Locks of Love. And I said, well, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, you're 10 years old, and you thought that was something nice to do. So she was my influence, this 10-year-old girl, and I thought to myself when I was going to space, for practical reasons, long hair in space is a little problematic. You can braid it and you can put it up, but it still sticks to Velcro. Every time you fly, you might get your hair stuck, which has happened to some friends of mine. And also when you're combing your hair, every lady knows you get a lot of hair in the brush, which on Earth it's nice because you can pull it out and it will fall in the trash can. But in space, of course, all of that's going to start going everywhere. It gets in everybody's food, gets in everybody's sleeping bag. It's just a little bit yucky. So I thought to myself, this is a great opportunity, and Grace was a great example to me that I can give my hair to somebody else who can use it a little bit more than I, and it won't get stuck in everybody's food.
You have very elaborately explained, in most of the videos that are there available on internet, how do you live in space. I would like to know, how do you find the time for your family? What is your schedule in a day? How do you find your time for the family, particularly for your dog that you love so much?
Gorby. Yeah, so we have normal days up in space, just like we do here. There has been some work on changing a normal human day, and it hasn't been very good. Most humans like a normal 24-hour day. So our organization has decided to maintain this 24-hour day. And so we wake up at 6 o'clock using the time zone in Greenwich Mean Time, so in England, in Europe. And then we stay up for about 16 hours, and then we try to sleep about 8 hours. But the benefits of doing that are that we have half of the work day is on the U.S. time zone, and half of the workday, our time, the 16 hours on the Russian time zone. And those are the main two parts of the space station. So their mission controls can actually have a normal day as well. Europe's mission control has a normal day. Unfortunately, getting farther east, India and Japan is not quite the normal working day. So our Japanese partner have a little bit of a problem. But so we try to keep a normal work day. We actually try to keep a normal work week as well. So Saturday and Sunday are a little bit different from Monday through Friday. We do probably what all of you guys do, and at least your parents think you do, is clean your room on Saturday, right? That's what you do. So we clean the space station on Saturday morning. Everybody has a module or two, and it's your turn to get the vacuum cleaner out and clean all the walls and stuff. And then we sometimes do some experiments on Saturday, but Sunday is entirely a day off. And usually the space station is quiet. If you get up early on Sunday morning and float around, it feels like a ghost town. You know, nobody's there because everybody's sleeping. The lights are down low. Maybe the light over the toilet is on, and that's about all. So it's a nice quiet time. And those are the times, nice quiet times, that we usually can use the internet protocol phone. Okay. It's like sort of Skyping back to home. And on Sunday is when I would see my beloved little dog on the video screen, and usually only for a moment, because my mom or my sister or my family or friends, other family or friends are talking, and the dog would be flying through the video screen, so I could just see him for a moment. My mom said that he used to hear my voice and stop for a second, but not so much.
Okay, so you also ran a marathon while you were on International Space Station, and then you also did a triathlon. I was a bit wondering, how did you do the swimming part? So if you just could take us through why did you come up with an idea and how it all went? Sure.
So the marathon I did on my first flight, and just sort of as one of these things to bring awareness that I think physical fitness is really important. It was probably one of the main reasons that I got selected to be an astronaut, because a large part of the interview to become an astronaut is if you're healthy. You know, it's more of a medical test, and part of that is, do you maintain your body with physical fitness? And I think it's very important. So I just wanted to highlight that when I did the marathon. Now the triathlon was slightly different. There was a reporter, maybe you know him, Dr. Sanjay Gupta. You maybe heard of him, works for CNN.
CNN,
yeah. He came to Johnson Space Center and was interested in what happens to the human body up in space. And so we were talking to him and showing him all of our exercise equipment. And of course we have a treadmill I ran the marathon on. We have a bike where you connect your feet on. There's no seat there, you just pedal on the bike. And then we have this thing called Advanced Resistive Exercise Device, which is a weightlifting machine. Using vacuum in canisters as the means of a force that you can actually lift weights. You can do a bench press, you can do squats, you can do deadlifts, you can do bicep curls, you can do crunches for your stomach and stuff. So he was saying, oh, it's too bad that you'll be in space because I run this marathon or triathlon, and I would invite you to come do this because we both think that physical fitness is important.